So then we will give the floor. Next on our agenda is the zoning update discussion, and we will give the floor to our town attorney to discuss his proposal for our zoning update and give us quite a lot of information, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Oh, that was right. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go through fairly briefly a quick overview of some of the issues in your current code. Oh, sorry.
It really helps.
So I'm going to go through briefly some of the issues in the current code. And talk about some big picture solutions. Again, we're just talking about zoning and subdivision, which folks will just call your land use code. And so that's how I'll refer to it, your land use code, which includes all your zoning and subdivision regulations. Right now, they're housed in two places. It's housed in Chapter 16 and Chapter 17. Generally, although you have a little smorgasbord of other zoning requirements in other places in your code, but generally, they're in Chapter 16 and Chapter 17. So altogether, if you just pull those two sections out, those two chapters out, it brings you to about 200 pages. So you got about 200 pages of zoning and subdivision regulations. So you might ask why? Why do we have such lengthy regulations in the town? Well, a lot of it has to do with repetition. So if you were to ask the question, can I have a duplex in my zoning district? You would think, all right, I'm in R2. I should probably just have to go to R2. And you will find some uses there, but you won't find them all there. You'll also find them down here in permitted uses, and you'll also find them here in conditional and temporary uses. So you'll answer that question in three places. And that's true just if you're in R2. So if you're in R3, you'll answer it in an additional place. And if you're in C1, you'll answer it in an additional place. You're in a PD, you got another place. So really, we have 7 different places where we answer that one question. And that is just an example of sort of the issue we got to in this code, and that it just kept ballooning over time. We kept doing, it seems at least, that there kept being sort of band-aid and band-aid solutions without comprehensively looking at these regulations. So organizationally, there's some issues, that to say, but it's also that the regulations themselves are fairly outdated. So if we just go down to your permitted uses, just to get an idea of what's allowed where, you'll see that there's a lot of specificity in places, but then also a lot of broad uses in other places. And you'll see it's very auto-centric. It's a lot of fast food type uses, and it's a lot of auto-oriented uses. So that to say, there's this issue as well of the regulations really being drafted for zoning circa like 1990, I would say, is what is sort of most typical of this, of your zoning regulations substantively. And that's not only true with your uses as I just described, it's also true of your dimensional and development standards. So we'd be looking at, for instance, parking lots at the front of the lot. So it would go sidewalk, parking lot, and then whatever commercial use it is, rather than sidewalk commercial use, so the pedestrian doesn't have to go through the vehicle traffic area and then parking in the back. What I just described in the latter case is more common, to sort of have those separate entrances, separate ways for vehicles to access a lot and pedestrians to access a lot.
More common in current zoning codes?
Yes, I should say
Most
more
updated,
modern.
more modern.
Yeah. Okay, and then within the actual sections, and you'll see this, council has seen this over the several years we've been working together, is that whenever we touch a section, we take it from something that's typically pretty lengthy, so a lot of words to describe something, to something that's a little more succinct. So your chapter 16 and 17 suffer from that same issue as well. It's kind of written in block paragraphs. And that's kind of true throughout your code, and we've been sort of undoing that as we go about the changes, but haven't looked at it comprehensively for your zoning. And then the other thing is organizationally, there's not really a structure here. So in modern codes, you'll have what's called ground up zoning. So it's looking at it from the developer's point of view of taking a piece of raw land and what it's going to take to get that raw land completely developed. And so that's typically how it's organized from subdivision. How are you going to divide out the lots if you need to? How are you going to put the buildings on the lot, including the site improvements like parking and landscaping? And then how do you get those things approved? So your current zoning, it actually has a smorgasbord of, you'll talk about procedures in several of these different sections. And you'll talk about the same subject sort of over and over, but it's not even just contained here. There's actually some slippage in some of the other chapters. Okay, so that's what we got. So how do we solve it and how might it look? So I threw together just really quickly how your new code might look organizationally.
Let me just real quickly interrupt for some context. So we've been talking about zoning commercial areas, right? Thinking about that particular property that the town purchased, how to rezone it so that we attract development that creates a revenue stream for the town. So when we're thinking about that, we're also thinking comprehensively about, does that mean this is also the time that we look at the full zoning code? So that's why we're giving you this presentation, to think about that question. Are we just zoning that property, or are we looking at the full context of our zoning? How does council want to proceed? So we're trying to just sort of start that conversation.
Yeah, I missed that. That's a good point. So at our last council meeting, we had that discussion. Council said, like, absolutely, we want to move forward with that commercial corridor. We need to get that commercial corridor more vibrant, more online, generate more sales tax. And we had the conversation with, it's going to be really hard for you to do another Band-Aid on this gushing wound. And you're also going to be left with some other issues. So for instance, say you just created a new, or just changed your commercial district, or just created a new district for that redevelopment area and zoned those areas into that new district, you would still be left with a transition that's maybe not in line with that new development. In other words, those properties that are right next to what you foresee as your new commercial corridor are still going to be stuck with this old kind of zoning. And there might be ways that we can sort of protect those historic residential properties through a comprehensive sort of look at your zoning. And we call that in a lot of modern codes transitional zoning. Transitional from sort of higher density commercial mixed use development to lower density historic type residential uses.
And I want to be clear, we're not criticizing the past code for zoning. We're saying that there's a modern way of doing it, and maybe it's time with council approval to modernize it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think really zoning is changed throughout time. It's supposed to sort of be a living document. The problem with a living document that doesn't have a organization that sort of is a bit more coherent is you're gonna look to multiple places for one answer, and you're probably still not gonna have a clear idea of, wait, what's the answer? Because this says that and this says that.
So it decreases the likelihood of developers saying, what's it going to cost for me to get from idea to actual having a store that's producing funds for my company? They know it's going to be more expensive because it takes more work.
Yeah, not only is there, what developers will tell you is, I'll pay the more additional funds up front. If you want higher design, if you want a certain type of uses, I'll pay you for that. Give me predictability. And so that's part of the piece we're missing, is that predictability of what actually are you permitted to do. That's kind of issue one, I would say, generally. And issue two is what you're allowed to do in conformance with sort of a more modern mixed use development.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just quickly threw this together to show like kind of how the organization of your code could be reworked. So we could look at sort of just a, oh, trying to zoom in here. Okay. So basically what you do, or what I would recommend, is a more modern approach, is house sort of all your general provisions in one section. You don't have to repeat them in each section. We'll go down to our zoning district. So you'll answer the question of what zone district am I in? We go down to uses to describe what am I allowed to do in that zone district. And then you'll go down to dimensional and development standards of asking, how do I have to build it? What does it have to look like? And then you'll go down to the last question, which is, and now how do I get it approved? And just real quickly to show sort of what maybe a more modern use table would look like, it would be broken down into these categories, and you'd have each zoning district next to each other. So you can see as you're making a policy decision, and property owners can see, okay, I'm in R2. That's our least dense neighborhood. I'm going to have the least amount of permitted uses here and probably the most restrictions on redevelopment. And then as I move right, the opposite is going to be true. And then we'd break it down into these categories of, I know I want to build something residential. What residential uses are permitted? And then we'd move down to sort of public uses like art galleries, commercial uses like hotels, and so on and so forth. Okay. So with that, I had two main questions for council in moving forward today. How do you want to scope this project? Do you want to tackle the entire land use code? And again, when I say that, I'm saying all regulations that really touch the regulation of land use, zoning and subdivision, chapter 16 and 17 for sure, but a couple of other sections throughout the code. Do you want to tackle that big problem? Or is it something lesser along the lines? Maybe you do just want to look at your commercial district. And again, the solution there would be quicker. If you're just going to do another sort of more band-aid solution, it's going to be a quicker solution. And on the other end, if you're going to do a comprehensive solution here, it's going to take more time and it's going to take more money. So that's kind of question one. How do you want to scope it? And the second question is, who do you want to do it? Do you want to go out to RFP for this work? Do you want my office to take the lead on it? Do you want Fairfoot and Woods to take the lead on it, or ask them to? And I guess within that second question of who you want to take the lead on it is how you want the changes to be tracked. And really there's two main options I would suggest for tracking those changes, each with very different cost outcomes. So the first one I'll call the breadcrumb approach. And in the breadcrumb approach, you are tracking every single change by footnote. So for instance, in your current code, you would take over every single sentence, move it into that new structure, even if it means you're kind of getting repetition on the front end. That'd be sort of your first step in the draft. Second step would be actually making the modifications and footnoting every modification. So for instance, maybe there's 3 places in your current code where it says single family dwellings are allowed in R2, which I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. The footnote would say, this section consolidated the following sections, which generally permitted single family dwellings in this place. Or it might say, this section resolved a discrepancy where this section in your code said X and this other section in your code said Y. So that's what I call the breadcrumb approach. As you can imagine, it's a much more time-intensive process. It has the benefit of showing you, or tracking, I should say, every single change made. Okay, so that's breadcrumb approach. The second approach would be the repeal and replace approach. And that is saying, we know there's a couple sections in here we like and that we want to keep. You'd name those sections to say like, hey, or you could say like anything we've done in the last 2 years, we know we want to keep that, just move that forward verbatim. But everything else we know is probably fairly outdated. And here's how we want you to generally go about those changes. You might say, we want to keep one residential zone for all of our historic lots in town and just call that our historic residential zone. And essentially, maybe the goal of that zone district is don't change anything. Just keep it the exact way it is. Maybe you have another zone that's for your commercial corridors. And it's sort of an opposite approach of, we know we want this to be a more modern, mixed use, walkable area. So give us a zone district that has those types of uses and those types of standards. And perhaps when you look at that, you say, and I think there's something missing in between those two. So give us a zone district that transitions those historic lots to those commercial redeveloped lots. And if we'd go for that real repeal and replace process, The conversation I would suggest, again, depending on who you choose to do the work, is you'd go through each section as I just showed you in that new outline. And each section, for instance, when I do this work with other clients, we'd go through the use table, every single use in every single district. And I ask council, and we go around and we take polls. Is this right? Yep, that's right. Is this right? No, that's right. And if we don't get unanimous, we say, all right, we're going to talk about it. So it's still time intensive. You still absolutely know what the regulations are going to be. You might just have a little bit less of a view of how that's a one-to-one change from how they are today. But absolutely, if you say, tell us how it's different, they could do that work on the back end regardless, whoever you choose to do it. Does that make sense? Those two different, okay. Okay, so those are the two main questions I had for council. I'm happy to go into more depth with your current code or more depth with other examples of other codes, whatever's helpful.
Councilmember Dubner?
So how does the Fairfield and Woods, with the survey coming out, how does that fit into changes to chapter 16, 17 here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we can fold those in, and I think this process is really apt in that way because we should be getting those recommendations soon.
So we've got the survey questions settled, and we're working on the mailing list. It should go out this week, the questionnaire. So I'd say in the next month, we should be able to have some final, if all goes smoothly, some final report
So you
publicly
can
made.
definitely fold in those recommendations to this process and just make it a part of this process. That way you can sort of seamlessly integrate them. If you feel like we need to get these suggestions, in place today, you could leapfrog it and just do another Band-Aid to your current code, put those suggestions in place in your current code, and then fold them into the new organization later if that's what council chooses to do.
That could be one of those things that if we were doing an appeal and replace, repeal and replace, we could say, keep that whole section that we just worked on
Yeah, exactly.
and move it when it's time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that work definitely won't be lost.
But the question of how to do it is so complicated, right? Like whether or not we follow every line and say, we replaced or changed this line and here's a footnote. We replaced or changed this line and here's a footnote. That versus we're doing the entire thing. I think that the fear is going to be, I'm just going to try to call out the elephant in the room, is going to be, how long does this take? How much involvement is there for the community? Because the community's going to be interested in that breadcrumb approach, because then we know like exactly what happened, right? We can follow that through every step of the way after the fact. You can go back and look and say, oh, right, this is why, this is how it was done. So if there was an approach to do a full repeal and replace, what kind of timeline are we talking?
Yeah, and let me show you a quick example. So I used to be just a land use attorney, worked for a national firm before I moved over to my current firm representing local governments. This is from my previous work, and we worked in Rochester, Minnesota. We redid their land use code. I love it there. Have you been there? Yeah,
I grew up just north of Rochester.
No
so,
way.
Yeah.
And I loved it there. Kindest people I've ever met. Okay, so they decided, yes, give us the breadcrumb approach. I'll tell you, they had a really huge budget. So it wasn't as much of a budgetary question for them. They went breadcrumb approach. This is how it would look. And just to give you an idea, there's 700 footnotes in this document. So you'd see like, hey, here's the source. It's from these two current sections in your current code. And here's exactly how we revised it. Okay, so cost differential, I'd say if you go breadcrumb approach, you're probably looking at about double the price tag.
Just because it takes more time?
Yeah, it takes way more time. With this sort of repeal and replace, council can just say, we like, just to give another example, I just finished up Morrison's land use code, and whoever you choose is going to have a different approach. I'm just sharing mine, so I guess keep that in mind. And Morrison said like, hey, we know we don't have much to work with in our current zoning code. Just get rid of it. And let's go through every single step of what we want it to look like moving forward. So we basically started from scratch there, where they said like, throw almost everything away. But one of the things they kept was community meetings. They had done a lot of work on like how they require or when they required community meetings through certain applications. And they said that section we like, we just tweak that, bring that forward. Like everything else, you can just get rid of. As context, Morrison got their zoning code. They literally copied and pasted it from Denver's in the 1990s. So pretty big difference, Morrison, Denver. So it's incredible it worked that well for them for that long. We went through the repeal and replace. It took about a year in total, the entire process, and we came in below budget. They budgeted just under 50,000 for it, which is probably lower than what you would need to do if you went out to bid. And we came in under budget, but partially, I would say, because of that process. And we did 8 community meetings. So we did not shy away from the public engagement piece, even though it was sort of a repeal and replace tactic. And the community had total buy-in. There was no public comments when we went to adopt that were negative. All of them were positive. And you can talk to the folks in Morrison now. They've seen a huge interest in redeveloping their commercial corridor since then, and they're poised to get their first hotel. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm picturing if we did the repeal and replace, we would have 8 to 10 workshops with public engagement. And I think what I heard is Morrison started their meetings early. And so they didn't add another meeting, but they added an hour to the beginning of the meeting.
Correct. So when they decided like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do something about our sales tax was a big part of the issue. And like, we don't understand our code at all. Like, we don't know how to even apply it to developers. You know, when they got the questions coming in, they didn't know how to answer them. So they knew they had a big problem. They started, when they made the decision, like, we've got to do this, we want it as, you know, fast tracked as possible. They made the decision to do it in 2 phases. They did their zoning first to get that off the ground, to essentially get the hotel in, to not delay that future revenue source, which worked. And the phase 2 was subdivision. So that helped them substantively, but it kind of slowed down the process generally, doing it in those 2 phases. And they decided at that point as well to start, I think it was every other meeting, we started an hour early, and we got through as much as we could in that hour. So we started every other meeting at 5 p.m. and it was a workshop where like the public was engaged and, you know, obviously council was. And we would take on individual topics. I would give them the topics beforehand. So I tell them, hey, like today, we're going to cover zoning districts. Here's my proposal based off like prior council direction. Here's what it means. I'm looking for feedback on X, Y, and Z. Because you only have an hour and because typically folks want to get through this process quicker, keeping it as targeted as possible is also really important.
And then for zoning changes, by the time you get through those workshops, you have a public hearing when you're adopting the changes?
Yeah, so once you actually have an adoption draft where you bring together the entire process and you're ready to repeal in place, chapter 16, 17, and there's going to be a handful of other sections for the town that will repeal at the same time, then yeah, it's a public hearing with 2 readings.
So to council who's attending remotely, as well as our council members at the table, this is a lot of information, right? Building on a prior conversation. So not always easy to like pull those threads through. Is everybody clear on why this is at the table right now? Let's just sort of, can I hear from all 4 of you in terms of the first question, how to scope it? Are you more inclined to say, we've got an urgent development on Benton, the town just bought this property, let's just zone that and take this big issue, this big process, and put it in the future? Or are you more inclined to look at it in a comprehensive way at this point? And I'll start with the people in the room and then move to our remote participant?
Me.
Councilmember Lasher.
I'm more inclined to look at it comprehensively. I feel like if we just do it in pieces, then we're just going to be putting Band-Aids on things. And I feel like that's not what we want. And it's been our council goal forever to bring in sales tax revenue from all angles. So I feel like doing it all together is going to give us a better picture, like Austin, or are we calling you Austin? The
Yeah.
attorney said, of, like how we can zone things where it's like if a house is next to it, like that's what I think is gonna give our town a better like flow and everything. And then can we answer the second question too, or just want to?
Sure.
Okay. I don't think we should do the breadcrumb thing. I'm always one for like the fiscal responsibility and to pay more. If we're doing it in a public setting, community members are allowed to come. We're, obviously, then we're going to be having the public hearing. So I don't think that we need to spend more just to have breadcrumbs. And I also think that reading something with breadcrumbs everywhere is going to be confusing to some people. So, and I also don't think we should can we answer who we think should do it? Yeah. I don't think we should use Fairfield and Woods, personally. I really think that either putting it in RFP or having, Mr. Flanagan's firm do it,
Cohen,
just since he
Winston.
knows us and
Yeah.
he knows what we want. And I think it would just be like very easy to work together before a meeting.
Mhm.
That's my.
Thank you. Councilmember Debner or Mayor Pro Tem Bailey?
Yeah, I second a lot of what Councilmember Lasher said. I definitely think we've been doing the bandit approach too often. I would say though that I know we were talking about the commercial, but I want to speak to the residential too, because I think that if we're going to do a Band-Aid on anything, it should be on the residential, on those issues there, because it wouldn't be work that we would lose. It's just, if we did the repeal and replace, it would be pretty seamless, like you said, to just stick it in now. And then when we're doing a more comprehensive approach, just take what we've already written and plop it back into the new code. I am personally a huge fan of breadcrumbs, but I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think it depends upon how much of our existing code is salvageable. Like, I mean, I can't answer that question. I mean, maybe Austin, maybe you can speak to that. Like, I mean, what percentage are we talking here with the land use code? Because if it's truly a situation like was similar to Morrison, where they're like, we only have a few sections that really are warranted to carry over, and it's easier to start fresh, then it would make more sense to do that than a breadcrumb approach. I like being my academic person that I am. I like tracking changes and seeing change over time, but it may not make any sense to do that.
So it's definitely a Gordian knot, your current code. So like once we start pulling a thread, you're gonna need to unravel the whole thing. And so with that, there's definitely some language in there that you can bring over. And there's a lot of ideas in there that you definitely will want to bring over. But there's no section that will be untouched. Like I think it's actually, like in Morrison, I could like copy paste that one section. Like it was in good shape. That section could be just brought in verbatim. I'm not seeing as much of that with the town's code.
So I guess,
Asked a question, since we heard from Councilmember Lasher on all three questions, really. Question one was how to scope it. You're saying comprehensive, but with maybe a fast track for the residential work that we've already started because of the urgency that we're hearing from our community.
Yeah, I want to start where we finished, and then I really think we need to make this the very next top level priority.
Mhm. And then as to question two, who to do it? Do you have a sense where, and you're not getting married to this answer. We're just trying to take everybody's temperature right
Just like off the top of my head, it would make sense if we followed something that was sort of similar to what Morrison did, just because we have an attorney at the table who is incredibly familiar with land use code, and it just would be, it could be like a sort of more efficient process. I'm also not opposed to doing an RFP, and if in Fairfield Woods would be welcome to respond to that, of course, but I don't think we should just go with them just because we went with them before.
Mhm.
So I think it should be a competitive process if we do decide to go that route.
Okay. and how to track the changes, you're still saying, I want to make sure I heard you, the repeal and replace.
Yeah, I think the repeal and replace makes more sense just because, I mean, just even though with my analytical brain, I like to see all the different changes. And
Right.
so the breadcrumb approach is really appealing to me, but not in our situation.
Thank you. Councilmember Debner.
I would also agree with Mayor Pro Tem Bailey that as much as my personal preference might be to breadcrumb it, if we're working with, kind of a 1990s version of code, I think the repeal and replace from a comprehensive perspective would really benefit us in the community. I also want to recognize that, considering the residential code concerns, a quick Band-Aid for that, I think would really satisfy a lot of our resident needs. And, just considering the recent changes, want to advocate for transparency and being really intentional about getting community involvement in this process because we're a small town. And when change happens, that can be concerning for some. And I think it'd be in our best interest to just get everyone at the table.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe really this is the kind of thing that we do a lot of public, like lay the groundwork for those conversations and give people sort of the bird's eye view and a calendar ahead of time
Yeah.
and invite everybody to the table with a flyer and some brochures and stuff like that. Cause it's a big project. Are you talking, so you're in line with the other two council members at the table that a more comprehensive approach with a fast track for the residential piece makes sense to you, and the repeal and replaces makes sense to you, given the circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, we would likely see a cost savings without having to get into the details about old code. It just, as long as we're transparent with the public and going out, getting engagement, I think the repeal and replace portion would be fine.
How do you feel about the RFP versus just our current town attorney? Do you have a gut feeling there?
I think it would be wise to maybe get some bids, just to consider. I think, more information would be helpful to hear, just kind of additional perspectives, especially if we could do like kind of a cost comparison and timeline comparison and what it would look like to kind of do it in-house and ourselves versus a request for pricing.
If we did an RFP, would your firm bid on it? Like, how would that work? That doesn't seem quite right.
Oh, we can talk about it more. I think, yeah, we can talk about it more. I hadn't quite
Okay.
thought through it. We typically don't bid on these projects. I get only the work from referrals now, so I've never bid on a land use code project since I've been with my last firm.
Mhm.
But I've probably done at least 10 at my current firm just all through referrals.
Mhm.
But we can talk through that. I mean, my initial reaction is like, go out to RFP, see if you have anyone you like, and if you don't, let's have the conversation again.
Mhm.
Though
I wonder,
might
like,
slow things down, but
is there a way that you could, I mean, without like doing a formal bid, is there a way that you could sort of cost out just like a guess
yeah, I mean,
on costs, like just based upon like what you've done with other clients?
yeah, I mean, I can tell you that I think I think they budgeted 50,000. I think they got 25 from DOLA. So it was a 25 match. And I think we actually came in at like 40. But I will say a huge caveat there is like it was pretty seamless. Like we had the public buy into, almost everything. We literally sat at a round table and it was like the same, 20, 30 people that came every meeting. We advertised it to everyone, but it was the same like 20, 30 people. And we were able to get to decisions pretty quickly. So it's a huge caveat. How I've seen some of these projects kind of balloon in cost is when you just don't have strong buy-in, when there's really big differences about what your community wants to see and trying to address those, because it just becomes, you have to put in a little bit more time and energy to try to address them if you've got really divergent views.
I want to make sure that we don't, that we give some time for.
Yeah. I was just gonna piggyback off on what Austin had said. I kind of wonder like if before we even dive into like putting the RFP out there, we have like a I don't know a couple listening sessions with our community and kind of get take the temperature on like what what they think of mixed use development and all those kinds of things because it may not make the sense to go down this path. I mean, it does economically, it makes a heck of a lot of sense, but I just feel like maybe we have a conversation before we put it out there. So it doesn't cost so much money in the end. I mean, I know we need to do it and I'm a huge proponent of doing it. I just maybe we have a conversation to just sort of dip our toe in.
I really like that idea.
Can I guess I'm just confused.
I feel like we're
Mayor-
getting off track here. I
Okay.
want to make sure that we hear from all four. I'm gonna bookmark that and come back to it later because I think that's a bigger conversation.
Yeah.
Councilmember Dennis.
Yeah,
On those three
not really. Oh,
questions, how to scoop it, who to do it, and how to track the changes.
can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now?
It's very
Hello?
low. Very low. And I'm all the way. You can hear her from there?
Yeah, I'm having some audio issues, I think, on my end as
Let's have
well.
her call
From
in,
what I've
because
been
we
able
can't hear
to
her.
hear, I'm not really a fan of breadcrumbing, but I think maybe if we
I'm
look at
sorry, Councilmember Dennis, can you call my phone and I'll put you up to the mic that way?
okay.
We tested this earlier and it did work. I could be connected on my phone and everybody could hear it in the room. No, because she's hearing it on that computer. And if we. Okay, Councilmember Dennis, you have the floor.
Okay, yeah, I've been having some audio issues on my end as well, but from what I can understand from the conversation, I think it's a good idea if we look at this more comprehensively. And I do want to mirror what Mayor Pro Tem Bailey had stressed is get some more community input. I think maybe having another conversation might be helpful in the situation. Excuse me if I'm out of line. I'm also having some audio issues, but that's kind of my hot take on it at the moment.
That's helpful. What about question number 2, who to do it?
Who to do it? I mean, I have faith in our town attorney. I'm also open to, I don't know, I'm not quite sure.
You
what
don't have enough
options would be
information
at
yet.
that point.
Okay. And in terms of tracking the changes, given the information that you currently have in terms of like the breadcrumb approach versus the repeal and replace, do you have a gut feeling there?
Mostly, I'm more in favor of repeal and replace, to be honest.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna keep you on the phone so that if you want to weigh in, you can ask for the floor and weigh in on the phone. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's kind of hard because it echoes on my end too. So I'm gonna have to like turn my audio off on the laptop in order to make that work.
You can just text and say you want to talk if you'd prefer. It's up to you.
Okay.
She can also just turn it on.
Right, then she can't hear it. Okay, just text if you want to weigh in and I'll try to make space for you every time, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So it sounds like we need a little bit more information in terms of the, what it looks like to go out to RFP and what the risks versus the benefits are of simply handing the job to our town attorney. And a little bit more information about the costs there. We do have some ideas that we could get. Do you want to talk to that issue? The grant idea?
Oh, the bill.
Mhm.
Well,
So that will be part of the budget discussion. So
Yeah.
that's part of the 3-year CIP plan.
Yeah, so there is some possibility that we could get a similar kind of deal with the split cost where DOLA would give us a grant for half of it and we would provide half, and we were sort of thinking 30 or 40 for, but let's bring that back with a more comprehensive look because we're hearing that there's not enough information there. And then in terms of the issue for how to speak about the larger project, maybe what we could do, like with the community, right? Like the council table knows these are our goals. They're all printed out. We've looked at them, we've adopted them by resolution. We know that one of the most important things we can do, probably the most important thing we can do, is diversify our revenue. And in order to do that, what it's going to take is this work so that developers can see our commercial areas as viable places to come and put their money and develop, and then that feeds into our long-term plans. So we know that at this table because we've had this conversation over the last 4 years at least, and before that, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's been a topic for as long as I've been on council.
Mhm. But I'm hearing that the council's not they're not 100% sure that there's buy-in in the community for that because there's not understanding about that.
That's exactly my, yeah. It's not that I just think people don't, we haven't presented it in a way, it hasn't sunk in a way that the importance matters to the community.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, Councilmember Lasha.
I just feel like, we're all elected officials here, and it's like we were elected to like lead the town set the town up for years to come. So it's like trying to like, oh, we need to have a meeting to get the buy-in. It's like I view it as like we're the leaders that are saying like, this is what we're doing, and we're explaining it to like our groups of people, not like, well, what do you think? Okay, well, they don't want to do that, so we're not going to do that. It's like we've made these council goals, and everything that we're doing is working towards our council goals. So it's like at some point, like, yes, I love community engagement. I love talking to neighbors and hearing what they think. But on some point, if my neighbor says, I don't think this is a good idea, I take their input, but I still am like, I'm going to be a leader, and I'm going to know that doing these things is what our town needs to set us up for success for 20 years.
And I agree with that. I just also think that it will be a more expedient and more efficient process if we kind of grab people by the hand and kind of help them, lead them along the path and let them see like why we're doing this. Like, I don't know if we had like maybe a presentation at a workshop from a developer who said like, hey, look at our land use code and tell me, would you come here and develop in Mountain View given the current code? And they would probably be like, well, no, because I don't even know what I can do because it's so disorganized and you're repeating yourself in 3 different places, like our town attorney said. But I mean, let's hear it from the developer maybe, and like have a presentation from somebody who's boots on the ground and does this all the time. And so it kind of like, it might make the picture clearer to our residents. And I'd rather like hold their hand and walk them along the same path than kind of like drag them behind us.
Okay.
It's kind of my perspective.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think behind that is like, look at your commercial corridor. That is what's allowed. So if you have a question of what your code means, you can look at it. That's what it is.
If a hotel wanted to locate on 44th right now,
There's no way you give them enough buildable size. It's gonna be 60% of parking lot. They'd get like 3 rooms.
I mean, that's the thing, is that it's not that complicated. That's the thing. I think let's schedule one meeting where it's a public meeting to talk about why we're doing this while we're continuing to work on the residential zoning. Because we all know we're all on the same page with the residential zoning. That needs to move forward. We've got a lot of pieces already in place for that. And maybe we can sort of, do something in the middle where we're not doing all of the, I don't know, a little bit of a compromise. We have a meeting with the community to really go sort of like the PowerPoint presentation that we did with the property purchases.
Yeah, that, and we had lots of comments that that was an incredibly beneficial presentation, and it helped sort of like open the eyes of the community, and they understood, I think they understood what was going on a lot better after that presentation.
But we also weren't hiding it from them. It's
Right.
like, when you're saying like you want to walk, you want to hold their hand or like walk along with them, not drag them. It's like, we're not doing anything that's not public. We're not making these decisions in a back room. And then they're saying, why did you do this? Like the whole step of the way, everything is public. They have the same, they can read our schedule of what's going to be an event. They know exactly. It's not like we're hiding anything from them.
Right. Okay, I'm going to put a stop to this because we'll just go back and forth. If everybody's okay, let's move on. I think we've gotten a lot of information and I really appreciate the presentation that you gave. I think it's really, really informative and it gets the ball a little bit further down the field. We're not making any big decisions here. We've gathered a lot of information. I think we have, do you feel like we have enough staff direction to know what we do next?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Let's talk about sort of what that community engagement piece would look like at the outset. I mean, to be quite honest, like that's what I was intending today to be, to
Mhm.
understand your code, understand how it's different from a modern code. So I think, you can hire someone else to do that. Absolutely. Barefoot and Woods did do that with your zoning. You can hire someone else. You can get,
I could probably put together a presentation with the help of some developers that really makes the case, and then we can share it and do a public presentation about why Mountain View is not moving forward commercially.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
I think it would be helpful to have, just kind of historically, because I do believe Fairfield and Woods had some elements of this topic in their presentation. So just kind of outlining historically what conversations we had when and what resources are available. So if residents have questions, they can kind of, do some more digging on their own and just kind of lay the groundwork for them for their own understanding. And then honestly, like maybe we just put a PowerPoint together of this conversation we had tonight, something like that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be like something crazy, like, crazy extensive. I just feel like that PowerPoint with the properties just, I feel like it answered a lot of questions. And I feel like people have a much greater understanding of, why we did what we did. I mean, they may not agree with it, but at least they understand it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Makes sense.
Thank you. Councilmember Dennis. We okay moving forward? I'm going to assume since your camera's off. Okay. All right. So we are going on to